This is Cold Start.
And the 2026 racing season is fully underway. So F1 finally is back on track for a couple of their races. IndyCar has had a handful of races, as well as NASCAR. So now that everyone's gotten back on track, a couple of those series with some new rules, new cars, I think it'd be fun to go through the series, kind of see what's the vibe like, what are the storylines so far, what is there to get excited about in any one of these series if people aren't paying attention yet, reasons why they should be.
All this sort of caught me off guard. You know, the off-season for racing gets shorter and shorter every year, it seems like. Sports kind of span and spread their footprint into more and more of the calendar. And so last year we didn't wind down Formula One until well into November. And here we are, and it's March, and we're already up and running, and we're into race 2 and 3 already. It's kind of hard to imagine. In other series, the Roar before the 24, the big race that happens before the 24 hours of Daytona, is in mid-January. So it's just hard to imagine that really there's like 6 to 12 weeks of downtime total for any motorsports series these days. Can you imagine how much work there is to be done in the off-season planning, just recovery and like a little relaxation for drivers and teams? No, they're right back at it. So it's an exciting time in the beginning of the season for all these series, but man, it just seems like we just finished.
I know, and that's great news for motorsport fans because, I mean, think about if you're into football, baseball, any of the other major stick and ball sports, there's a pretty decent off-season that they don't get to watch their favorite sport on television. But as for race fans, if you're into GT cars, open-wheel NASCAR, whatever it is, you have a pretty good segment of the year that is dedicated to racing, and there's racing that's going on. Now, in these storylines and all these different series, I think F1 was the most anticipated going into the 2026 season because of all the changes, right? We've heard the headlines that the cars are brand new chassis with brand new power plants, new rules, new regulations, even a new number of teams out on track, adding one more additional team with the 2 Cadillac cars getting out there and Audi taking the place of Sauber. So some awesome stuff going on, a lot of anticipation of what this new power plant was going to be like with this whole energy recovery and kind of the quote-unquote push to pass. I know that's an IndyCar term, but essentially what these new F1 cars are going to have. DRS is out, this new wing system that they had. Everyone was anticipating of what are these cars going to be like, who's going to be on top, and what is the racing going to be like?
With all of the changes to the car and the rules around it, we expected that there might be some variability in the first race or two, and that's kind of what we've seen, right? The number of teams that had mechanical failures was multiple factors higher than we'd seen in any race, I think, in all of 2025, because that was the tail end of a generation of car, the chassis, the power unit that they've been running on for a few years. So they've known it, they've had it tuned, they've had it working pretty well, but all that got thrown out with the new rules. We have new power units and new chassis both, which is super unusual. Usually it's just changing one of those two things at a time. So really fundamentally different cars. And to your point, the grid looked a little different. We had some different rules around how qualifying was run, given the number of different teams. We had 2 groups of 6 for the first 2 rounds of qualifying, followed by a round of 10 remaining cars to finish up there with different durations for how much time each of those qualifying sessions would run. Lots of changes there. And coming off of last season, we saw the dominance of McLaren for several years running as a constructor, with Lando Norris as world champion, Oscar Piastri with really strong performance, kind of expecting that they would be the incumbents for setting off this season in a really strong way. But it's not quite turning out that way so far.
Yeah, in the off season, I had a lot of anticipation for that first race and a lot of excitement going into the Australian GP. And I can tell you, the Australian GP did not disappoint. There was plenty of drama and action going on. And yes, like you were talking about, a lot of it was mechanical failures, toothing pains. I mean, I watched a little bit of like the preseason testing that was going on, but there wasn't anything like big happening. And a lot of teams try to sandbag anyway in that preseason testing, not trying to show their full hand just yet.
A little head fake.
Exactly, right? And like you're talking about, like people were expecting that McLaren were going to be on top. And I mean, the Australian GP kind of proved otherwise for the most part. I mean, it even kicked off in qualifying of the drama of the weekend already starting, where Max Verstappen was out first lap, not first corner of potentially his first lap for qualifying. He walls his car, right? And that was attributed to a mechanical failure, locked the rear end, and it's boom, straight into the wall. And a lot of us, looking forward to Max trying to take it back to McLaren this year and retake the title of world champion. And first corner of essentially the first real-timed session, and he's already in the wall.
And then you have Oscar Piastri, who was battling for the championship last year and looked like a plausible candidate to take it all. At his home race in Australia, didn't even get out onto the grid for the beginning of the race, crashed the car before he got out on track. So a sort of inauspicious start for the Australian and the McLaren team, as well as Verstappen. So imagine that combined with new teams out on the grid. You have the Cadillac team, the Red Bull with a new power plant, the Audi team, all these changes that have occurred. And teams were definitely showing those teething pains, right? The new engines, trying to figure out how to tune them, the new aero, using all the new modes on the car. And then, of course, there's always the old stalwart and things that have been around for a long time that affect the outcome of races, or things like the strategy that the teams were employing. And once again, we saw Ferrari coming through with the great performance, but the lack of strategy that sort of bit them in the butt.
It was kind of cool to watch the cars back out on track. I wish, from my perspective of being, I guess, a newer F1 fan and watching these new cars and trying to read up as much as possible about these new systems of the drag reduction, which I know it's not the DRS, but like the wings folding down the front and rear wing, and where it was going to be like lower drag zones, and then I guess the higher drag zone or the higher downforce zones, and then this whole new like push to pass, like releasing the energy. I just wish that from a broadcasting perspective, they would have explained it a little bit further of like which zones on track those systems were going to be active or not active, or when the drivers were even like pushing the button to like discharge the energy. It just seemed like they could have done a little bit of a better job to explain or showcase that to the fan, or explain it, which maybe I missed that part of the broadcast. I don't know.
I used to rely on seeing those boards that said DRS on the side of the road to say, okay, this is DRS zone, or the graphics that they use as an overlay. But I think they did sort of a poor job in educating viewers and fans about these new systems. I noticed there was a sign that said SM on the side of the road. I'm like, what the hell does that stand for? I had to go look it up. It meant straight mode. I'm like, oh, straight mode. Oh, that's where cars can use the active aero. Okay, that's what that means. So when you see SM, it means these are places where the driver can use the front wing, the back wing to try to reduce some of their drag. And then there's OT, which stands for overtake mode, which is really more like the DRS area. And that's the place where there's a boost available to a driver for a duration of time. So the OT signs and the SM signs kind of giving us some view into those things. And I had a hard time getting my head around it, honestly. There were times when all of a sudden a car would gain on another car, and I wasn't sure, was that because they had better straight line speed, because they were using some kind of energy recovery or harvesting what was in their battery. I really didn't know. So it made it a little confusing at times to see the relative performance of cars out on the track together in conditions where, oh, somebody made a great overtake, a really great pass, and boy, it looked like they had a little bit more speed than I expected. And my assumption was they were using one of those modes, but it wasn't really clear to me.
Yeah, and it seemed like the cars now, the newer cars, they have more lights on them. This is a weird thing to say, but like I know that they have like the flashing red lights on the rear of the cars for when I guess they're out of battery or they're out of that additional power, so that cars behind them know that they're going to be a little bit slower. But I also noticed on the front of the vehicles, on the side mirrors, they now have flashing yellow lights.
Right.
Which I don't know if that's like the car stopped or what. I saw it on the start of the race. I saw when some of the cars had mechanical failures, those yellow lights were flashing on the wing mirrors. But I kind of would encourage F1 of like, make those front lights flash or color something different when the car's like in boost mode, so that visually for us watching on television, you could be like, oh, he's hitting the button.
Yeah, there is some variation there. I think they've, again, done a pretty poor job of introducing all this. So they call those lateral safety lights because they're on both sides of the car.
Are those the red ones or the yellow ones?
These are the amber ones,
okay.
Right? So they're hazard warnings, and they'll turn on if the car is stopped or going slower than 20 kilometers an hour outside the pit lane. They're going to provide visibility to other drivers in like low visibility conditions, or if there's an accident going on.
So it's legitimately hazard lights.
It is absolutely hazard lights.
So F1 cars now have hazard lights and technically could have turn signals if they wired them in properly.
Don't overlook that. Who knows what's coming? Then they have the rear wing lights, which are flashing to show when they're doing their energy harvesting in the MGUK, or if the car's under, interestingly, a virtual or a safety car.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I wasn't sure about that. And then on the roll hoop, there's green lights, which means that the car is safe to touch, because with all the hybrid system stuff on the car, when the car is considered live, they say it's dangerous and they don't want people touching it, which is purple or red lights on the car.
Interesting. So, like, you could get shocked. But I still think, like, it would be cool for the broadcasters or F1 in general to, like, utilize those lights for viewers watching on television, or at least having one of those graphs or diagrams or visuals on the screen that you can see when someone's hitting the button to, like, I guess, overboost or whatever you want to call it in F1.
Yeah.
But I know in IndyCar, like, they show you how much push to pass each driver has throughout the race. It'll highlight their name when, like, they're using push to pass if they're highlighting a battle between two cars. So it gives you a better perspective of, like, who's hitting the button, who's not hitting the button, that sort of deal. Because I agree with you. Like, in the beginning of the Australian GP, once again, phenomenal race, right? Super dynamic, a lot of overtaking, really, really exciting racing. But I agree with you. It was kind of like one car just all of a sudden had more speed than the other. So it'd be a little bit better to understand exactly what's going on, especially now that these cars have so many new systems.
I would have liked to seen that in the on-screen overlay. And where your point, I think IndyCar does a really good job of showing in real time the battery usage. You can see somebody's battery quickly draining or adding some capacity little by little. That's indicating exactly what's happening at that moment in time for that car. There's one other light on the car, which is there's red lights on the back, which are the rain lights that we're used to, but they're also being used for anti-stall. When the car is in anti-stall mode, for example, starting off the line from a standing start, they'll have those red lights flashing. So you'll see that on the grid when they're just getting ready to go.
Now, going into this race, watching it, a handful of people came over to my house to be able to watch the opening race of the season. And before the race even got started, I had the idea of, all right, we got to do like a party game or something like that going into the first F1. Maybe this is me just trying to make it more entertaining as a NASCAR fan of, like, I need to add some spice to the situation.
Right.
But I was thinking to myself, I was like, okay, new cars, there are going to be a lot of mechanicals. That's kind of the assumption. There's going to be teething pains. I mean, the Aston Martins didn't look promising to begin with coming into the weekend. And so the game that we played was like, every time a car had to retire, you had to take a shot.
Oh,
now,
man.
I didn't think that it was going to get so out of hand, but now after the Australian GP, we know that there was 6 retirements. There was even 2 retirements before the race even started. So
nice little warm-up for you guys.
It was a good time. So, like, for the second half of the Australian GP, when things kind of got a little bit boring and stalled out, we were still having a good time.
That's awesome to see. You know, and in the end, we had one of the Cadillacs finish the race, which, all things considered, kudos to them. They have a brand new car and a new power plant. Okay, it's based on Ferrari this year, but still. And they managed to get one of the 2 cars through to the end. That was pretty good.
Neither one of the Cadillacs finished last.
Absolutely.
That's a big
That's a
W on the
huge
board.
win, no question. Audi managed to get points in their first race out. Bortoletto, I think, finished 10th, so solid job there. And overall, George Russell and Kimi Antonelli from Mercedes, a dominant and solid 1-2. Mercedes looks really strong this year. Ferrari looks really good too. If it wasn't for their strategy, I think it could have been a closer race than it was.
Yeah, but I mean, like, typical Ferrari making their exciting, terrible decisions. I would hope that this year Hamilton starts to be a little bit more aggressive with the team to get the results that he's looking for, because you're right, the cars look strong, they look good, they looked good in preseason testing. I just think the strategy perspective just needs to be a little bit more there. And I think it's going to be hard for these teams to catch back up with Mercedes, especially for the first couple races. You know, they're going to show strong performance.
Yeah, I think as we look back at Melbourne and Shanghai, we're going to see that, you know, things are kind of keeping in line with our predictions overall, that the car is proving to be a little bit of an issue. We're figuring out the new car. We're learning how to drive it. We're figuring out what the new rules are going to be and how to employ those for a good result. So we're hopeful for a good outcome this season. The beginning of the action this season is promising. So maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised with how good of a season it could be given all the changes that have been made.
Yeah, I think some pros with the cars they are providing some good racing on track, some good side-by-side action. The only downsides is how much entertainment do you get out of, as a fan, watching a bunch of cars not finish the race. And I mean, I don't know the statistics from last year, but was there any GPs in 2025 where 6 cars didn't finish? I felt like that was a pretty large number of cars that just DNF'd.
That's generally only under rain races, right? When there's bad weather and we see a lot of
big
wrecks.
crashes.
Yeah, but I can't remember any race where it was dry conditions and we saw that number of retirements. I think maybe in a way, as much as we were nervous about the new cars and the new regulations, something we've always asked for is just making the car a little harder to drive.
Yeah.
Make the car a little looser, make it a little bit more of a handful for the drivers. And I think that evidenced itself through the form of Verstappen and his crash and Piastri and his crash. Okay, they were mistakes, but literally the cars are harder to manage, and we're seeing the result of that.
Right, whether that's because of mechanical failures or just, the dynamic of the vehicle is different, because you're right, Oscar Piastri and Max Verstappen are individuals that you would expect not to lose control of the car. And so I think it is going to make for interesting, dynamic races, because there's going to be action. There's going to be things happening, whether that's cars catching on fire, whether that's cars braking, or people losing control, whether that's because the car itself is just dynamically different and more challenging, or once again, some of those mechanical things happening as well. So, I mean, it might be frustrating to watch your favorite team having issues with the car, and it's going to be easy to blame it on the new regulations. But all in all, as me as an outsider F1 fan, it's just kind of cool to see like stuff happening in a race. Like there's things for the announcers to talk about the entire time the GP's going on.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I think we have a good set of racers, good mix of people. I was pretty happy to see Valtteri Bottas back in F1. I think he's undervalued and underappreciated given how strong he was with Mercedes back when they were really dominant. So, and he's kind of a goofball, and I love his sort of energy that he brings back, and that he's on the Cadillac team, just win all around. So really looking forward to seeing what happens there, and maybe we should move into NASCAR.
Yeah, moving into NASCAR and IndyCar, a couple weeks ago, they actually shared the same track, which is interesting because a lot of people don't really think about IndyCar and their oval races, but a couple weeks ago, they shared a weekend out at Phoenix, NASCAR and IndyCar.
I guess there's a couple times when they did do this before. They did a doubleheader the same way at Phoenix in 2020, and they decided it didn't really come out that well, but it's been a long time since then, so they went back, and by all accounts, it looked like they had two successful races over the weekend. Both had good results. Seems like it worked.
Yeah, which it's just cool to see them and like combining those two sports. I think for NASCAR and IndyCar in general, they're just trying to merge fan bases, right? And I think that's a great way to do it. It's great for the fans. It's great for the people of Phoenix, where you can buy a ticket, you can watch an IndyCar race and a NASCAR race in the same weekend. I think it's genius. I love that they're bringing those two worlds together. Now, let's dive a little bit deeper into NASCAR, then we'll get into IndyCar, and we'll get into more about this whole like conjunction and trying to do like shared fan bases. But the NASCAR season is kicked off, in my opinion, with a banger.
It's been really unusual, right? I'm not the world's biggest NASCAR fan, but even I know for somebody to win the first three races in a row, that's super unusual.
I know, to start off the season with setting history of one driver winning the first three races is pretty cool, right? And there's been big storylines. I think NASCAR's decision in the opening of the season has been phenomenal as well. So the first three races was Daytona, of course, the 500.
And no other series does that, where they start off with one of their marquee races as the kickoff of the season.
Right. I mean, it's one of the biggest races of the year, and it's the first time that they're out on track. Then they followed that up with Atlanta, which they've done in the past, but in recent years, Atlanta's kind of changed its form as a track into more of a drafting track, which usually leads to a lot of action and kind of anything can happen. And then the third race of the year was COTA. It was a road course. They went to Circuit of the Americas for the third race. So, I mean, if you look at this as a NASCAR driver, drafting track, road course.
What a weird opening.
Those three races are kind of wild card races right off the bat, because drafting tracks, anything can happen. There's going to be big crashes. Anyone can win the 500 at the end of the day. Same thing with Atlanta. Phenomenal racing that happened there. Big drafts, big runs, big crashes as well. And then COTA is kind of the same thing, where a lot of drivers are like, well, I'm not really a road course specialist. And so for Tyler Reddick to win those first three races of basically gamble, and being good at road course racing, phenomenal, like in crazy fashion for him to make that happen.
Yeah, more power to the guy for being able to show that sort of variation in his skills too, right? For what you have to do to win at a super speedway versus what you have to do at a road course, just totally different disciplines within the sport. to the point where some of the teams and drivers sort of throw away the road course races because they're just not tuned for it. And it was kind of cool to see them mix up the schedule that way. My past history, I remember Sonoma was always the first road course of the season because we always used to make that comment about standing out there and watching them make the first right turn that they had all season long. So COTA being introduced so early in the season is a really interesting choice. And by all accounts, it looks like it went really well.
Yeah, because, I mean, think about Sonoma's usually the first week of June. Now it's moved to the end of June. But that usually was the first time that they ever went to a road course. It's never been this early in the season. Now, the road course race itself, just to kind of talk on that a little bit, it was a great race. They use an interesting layout at COTA where they don't use the full track. They actually use a segment of the track, which it's better suited for NASCAR. It gives the fans more visibility of the vehicles. But an interesting interview post-race happened with Brad Keselowski where he kind of from a team owner perspective, because he does own a team, talked about the road course races. And he's just I don't understand why NASCAR is putting so much emphasis on the road course races because it's the most difficult to get sponsorship for, because I guess people mostly assume NASCAR with ovals. It has the worst TV viewing, so it has the worst ratings, and it has the least attendance of people in person. So it's interesting because for us, I really like watching road course racing with NASCARs. I think it's really interesting. I love the dynamic of it. Those cars are 100% so out of place on a road course that it makes for really interesting racing.
And their dynamics are such that, they take the curbs hard. They do things that you don't see a lot of other cars out on those road courses doing.
Right, and they can bang fenders and stuff like that. But it's really interesting of yes, the numbers and the statistics, the actual hard facts are that NASCAR really isn't that successful on road courses, and why do they put so much emphasis on it? But you can understand their perspective of wanting to, expand the sport, try to get a new fan base, that sort of deal. But yeah, it's really interesting that the first three races were so dynamic in that nature, and now we're kind of into this second phase of the season where it's going to be Phoenix, Vegas, I think Dover, Martinsville, kind of the generic NASCAR tracks. And I think NASCAR did an awesome job of deciding to have such a dynamic opening to the season of trying to grab people's attentions, where you had such dynamic racing at Daytona, at Atlanta, and COTA, if you're a road course fan, drawing you into the storyline so that you can make your way through the kind of generic oval tracks and still have something to watch or pay attention to.
And the storyline's gotten interesting because if you don't know the background, we have a couple teams who are suing NASCAR in antitrust and for anti-competitive behavior in the form of the 2311 team. They were recently victorious in their court case and their lawsuit against NASCAR, and then they come out of the gate and they win the first three races. So that's sort of like a FU to NASCAR from this team. They're just out there just eating it up, destroying it. And even in the face of a schedule that's a little unusual and kind of different than what historical NASCAR has been able to deliver.
It's really awesome to see them be so successful. And 2311, that's the team that's owned partly by Michael Jordan. So it's awesome to see him be a part of the sport and be so dominant in the early part of the season. And it's kind of funny that this transition that's happened now, it's when we went to Phoenix, or when NASCAR went to Phoenix, that a lot of the teams were saying this is the start of the real season. That those first three kind of wild card races were just anything can really happen. And now we're getting into, the rhythm of the rest of the season. Now, the other major storyline that was happening at the very beginning of the NASCAR season, so Tyler Reddick, he won the first three races, 2311 in their lawsuits, being victorious there, being victorious in the very beginning of the season, history being made. The funny thing is that you would imagine Tyler Reddick is probably a really popular NASCAR driver right now. It's probably gained a lot of followers on Instagram based on his success in the beginning of the season. Well, you would think so. Yes, he gained a lot of followers, but there was another driver that has gained more followers than Tyler Reddick in the first part of the NASCAR season.
It's so NASCAR-like for the edgy outsider, somebody who's a little different, to get more press than the person who's just winning in an uninteresting way, maybe.
Oh, it's total NASCAR of the guy that got punched in the face is just as popular as the dude that won the race.
Yeah.
So in the beginning of the season, Carson Hocevar has been making headlines in a bunch of different ways, partly for great reasons, partly for terrible reasons. He's become a very kind of controversial, dividing character within the sport. Now, in the beginning of the season, kind of paint you the picture of why are people hating on Carson Hocevar? Well, it kind of started in previous seasons of him being in the Cup Series. He's just always been a really aggressive driver, making maybe decisions that he shouldn't and causing accidents or wrecks or, pissing people off for the most part on track. Now, at the beginning of this season for 2026, he was leading the lap before the checkered flag at the Daytona 500, got turned. He was making good moves in the 500, not being too aggressive. Where he started to make headlines even more so is at the Atlanta race, where he was basically just going for any gap that was available, taking every run, making risky maneuvers, caused maybe a couple accidents. But this whole driving behavior of just kind of all or nothing that we haven't seen in NASCAR in a very, very long time has caused a lot of people to either absolutely love him and be diehard Hocevar fans or despise him and think that he's kind of ruining the sport in the sense of not playing by the rules, quote unquote.
Yeah, well, NASCAR loves nothing more than a bad guy. I think there's always that sense that we want the outlaw, we want the rebel. Dale Sr., right, was the best emblem of this, to the point where he'd take people out of races just because they pissed him off or just for the fun of it. And he's held in the highest regard of maybe the history of NASCAR, number 3. You can't get away from that. So maybe there's potential here. This is somebody early in their career starting to show signs of that. What do you think?
He was very successful in the trucks as well as Xfinity. He has not won a race in Cup yet, right? And what I find so interesting about the Hocevar conversation is there's a lot of former racers that do broadcasting for Fox and different sports networks. So, you have the likes of Kevin Harvick, Jamie McMurray, Clint Boyer, stuff like that are commenting on this storyline. And what I find the most interesting is that those drivers are divided of whether, I'm a big Hocevar fan, I really like what he's doing. And the other ones being like, I want to smack the guy upside the head and talk some sense into him. And I find it so interesting that there is such a divide. And, I can understand the perspective of like, if you're getting wrecked by Hocevar week in, week out, that stuff gets pretty old. But from the fan perspective, it's entertaining as hell. And from my perspective as a driver, my biggest thing is like these commentaries of how Hocevar needs to fall in line and play by the rules, and he needs to understand that he needs to work with the other drivers, and that if he keeps driving like this, people are going to hate him on track. Why is it my job as a driver to become friends with the rest of the field? They're my competitors. I'm out there to win. And I feel like we haven't seen this mindset from a Cup driver in a really long time of like, I'm not here to have a career and be here a long time. I'm here because I can't see myself anywhere else, and I don't want to do anything else other than win races. And that was the Dale Sr. mentality. A lot of the interviews that you would see talking with him, it wasn't like, oh my God, well, how can you do this activity? It's so dangerous. He's like, I can't see myself doing anything else. And like, when I go out there on track, I'm there to win. And I think Hocevar has that same attitude, and a lot of other drivers in recent years kind of have this new attitude of like, they don't want to rock the boat. They want to have a long career in racing because they see it as a job rather than this thing that they have to do and prove themselves to be a champion. They're like, no, I just want to like make the sponsors happy. Don't cause any sort of issues. Don't want to cause drama. I don't want to be in the headlines. I just want to be here for 20 years and retire. And it's like, that's lame. That's not what racing's about.
I think that's a lot of it. When new racers are coming up, they have to spend so much attention and energy on their social media and how they're being presented out in the world and what they say and what sponsors they may piss off or be promoting. And all that's so important to their potential career now. People are really cautious. They don't take risks in those areas. And so it's really kind of fun and interesting to see somebody out there who has this, we don't care how this thing is going. We're just going to go out there and do the best we can. And it'd be one thing if he was wrecking cars and had no results to show for it, but he had 2 second-place finishes last season. He came in 4th in Atlanta. He's proving to be a really strong driver out there. And okay, doesn't have all the results to show for it, but that sort of attitude that creates a little tension in the paddock, that people feel strongly about him one way or the other, that's the kind of thing the sport needs.
Right. And once again, I don't care if my competitors like me or not. Right. Now, there's a difference between like wrecking someone and then all of a sudden you're getting wrecked by people that you wrecked. That's not a good position to be in anyway. But if people have this attitude that they see Hocevar in their mirrors and they're like, oh God, get me away from this guy because he might wreck me. It's like, that's almost the same attitude people had about Dale Sr. It's like you saw the black number 3 in your mirror and it's coming up on you. It's like you either moved out of the way or you were getting moved. Like that was the mindset. And yeah, Hocevar, you could argue it's like he just looks like a young, dumb kid that's being way too aggressive and he hasn't cut his teeth yet. But there's so many other major drivers that have gone on to go be champions that had the same sort of attitude. I mean, a young Dale Sr., like we're talking about, Tony Stewart when he was in his early years in the Cup Series, Joey Logano, Kyle Busch, same thing. When they were young drivers, everyone said, oh, they're being too reckless. They're being too aggressive. And they went on to be very successful Cup racers and have either very supportive fan bases or you hated them, right? Very dividing characters in that sense. And I think Clint Boyer in one of the pre-race interviews said it best, where I like what Carson Hocevar is doing right now, because to survive in this sport and to stay in the car, you need a loyal fan base. Right. And that's what Carson Hocevar is building right now, is so many people that are watching him and just loving it. Because from a fan perspective, it's entertainment. Finally, we don't have these kind of like watered down drivers that care about their social media presence of, oh, I don't want to like say the wrong thing. It's like, no, this dude's like, he's out there to win or go home on the wrecker, and there's no in between.
Yeah, even if it's somebody you love to hate, I think that's part of the narrative and the storyline that makes up a good NASCAR season.
Yeah.
And so he's out there playing that role. It's just something maybe we haven't seen as much of, or to your point, the Tony Stewarts of the world and people like that, there's not that many of them out there anymore. You don't see that character type represented nearly as much. And to me, it's a little weird because here's this series where our favorite slogan to throw around is rubbing is racing, but you have this upstart who's rubbing people the wrong way and everybody's getting all upset about it.
Just totally doesn't make any sense. And I think what's also really enticing about him and like why NASCAR should be like, this is awesome and this is what the sport's been needing, is you want to tune in because you're like, I don't know what the 77 is going to do this race. Like, what's going to happen next? You have no idea. I think that's the excitement about it, is like, there is this feeling that I have, and I am a Carson Hocevar fan, of like his win is coming sometime soon, and I just want to make sure that I'm able to watch that race happen live.
Yeah, I guess in finding this connection between sports, right? We're looking at NASCAR, and we had Fox Sports being the broadcaster that was bringing them both to Phoenix over that weekend. What are the other opportunities for us to find commonality among these things? Oval racing is something that happens in NASCAR and Indy. Road course racing is something that happens in NASCAR, Indy, and F1. The more we look across these series, the more we look at the things that bring energy and excitement to being a viewer, being a fan of a series, those things matter. And Formula One's been doing such a great job of that. They've gone from being the most successful sport in the world that was unknown to the U.S. to gaining traction in this place, in this country, in this market. And so what's the potential for NASCAR to kind of dovetail into that? IndyCar, the fact that they're combining their television rights, having presence in the same place together makes a lot of sense. But then NASCAR has this weird thing where they rotate the television rights among other broadcasters. So this Fox opportunity is a limited time one, only will exist in certain weekends when they have the coverage of both NASCAR and IndyCar.
Yeah, and in making that transition, maybe starting to talk a little bit more about the IndyCar season and how it's been going so far. But it was interesting in the very beginning, right? I was excited to watch NASCAR and for NASCAR to start again, because there's just so many things that can happen at the 500. And then the Atlanta race was enticing. Coda being there was awesome. The storyline now of like watching Carson Hocevar and everything like that, there's that continued excitement that I have to watch and continue to watch NASCAR. And the storylines are very, very dynamic right now.
Yeah, and of course we had your favorite upstart last year, Connor Zilic, who's out there doing it. We've seen him drive in other series as well, but him out there as a strong player in the Cup Series this season after having come up at Xfinity is really exciting to see too.
Yeah, and that was on the list too of the excitement to want to watch NASCAR and continue to watch, right? And with F1, I was really excited to watch the season opener because new teams, new drivers, new cars, new power plants, you don't know what's going to happen. Now, the final conversation, which is IndyCar, I was really excited to watch the first race at IndyCar, right? Because you're like, new season, what's going to happen, who's going to be the top player, what's going to be the storylines, what's going to be the dynamic, all that sort of stuff. Now, IndyCar, they start at St. Pete. It was cool to watch that the NASCAR truck race joined them on that weekend to be kind of their pre-race race that happened. But watching the IndyCar race, it quickly turned into, oh God, 2026 for IndyCar is looking a lot like 2025, and making this comparison of the exciting driver that Carson Hocevar is, a very divided and very controversial and very dramatic. And then you have the complete contrast in IndyCar, which is Alex Palou of being this Mr. Steady Eddie and just dominating. And so the first race at St. Pete for IndyCar kind of was a little disappointing, and I think probably was IndyCar's worst nightmare, which was oh, it's the Alex Palou show again.
Right. And it kind of makes me wonder, IndyCar starts out at St. Pete every year, at least has for the last 15 years or so. Back to the thing where they're starting out at a street course. They're not on an oval. They're not on a road course. Is that the best way to sort of kick off the season, get new fans excited? I love a street course. It makes for interesting racing. But is that the best product that IndyCar could put out there for their fans? Interesting that they were able to take advantage of that schedule overlap like they did in Phoenix, in St. Pete, where you had the truck races for NASCAR and the IndyCar in the same place on the street course. So that's interesting. But all of that is backdrop to Alex Palou, to your point, in that DHL car just being so dominant. I heard this statistic. It kind of blew my mind. I know he had been in the lead for, all of 2025, but
Yeah.
It was coming out of 2024. So they said it was actually 626 days that Alex Palou was the leader of IndyCar. So spanning really over 3 seasons, he was the dominant person and in the lead. And it was only in this last race that occurred where Joseph Newgarden was able to take the win and take the series lead. So for the first time since June 2024, the leader of IndyCar was not Alex Palou.
The season opener was kind of a snooze fest, not a lot of highlights to speak of. When they went to their second race for Phoenix, the crossover with NASCAR, you're right. There was a little bit more excitement. There was cars that went into the wall. Alex Palou got turned into the outside wall. Not wishing evil or bad on anyone, but like watching Alex Palou get crashed out of an IndyCar race, you're like, yes, dynamic, something different.
It could happen.
He's not going to win this
That's
race.
right.
So it's interesting. Alex Palou is the dominant driver. He is kind of the favorite to win the series again this year, but he's a dynamic figure in the sport just because you don't want to see the same guy win again. You almost root against him, not because he's a bad guy or he's controversial. He's actually a really nice guy, and you're like, you wouldn't want to wish anything evil upon him, but it's just, you want to see something different happen in the series.
And such a steady driver. Ultimately, the crash that happened wasn't his fault. Rinus VeeKay was coming up behind him, and there wasn't really enough room on the outside up near the wall, and he should have backed out of it, and he didn't, and he went right into the back of Palou. And that's just the way it goes. So this guy who's been able to be untouchable for so long proves his mortality, and we see at least a different outcome in the racing series for now.
And I mean, what's your opinion about IndyCar on ovals? Like, is that something that entices you? Is that exciting? Like, I think that is a very interesting thing about IndyCar being an open wheel series, is that they do the street circuits and the road courses just like F1 does, but then they also still have a handful of oval races in their schedule.
Yeah, there's some dynamics of the oval races that are just different and interesting. And the ovals, the variation from oval to oval, I didn't appreciate for a long time until I started watching more oval races. So just seeing how they get from the straights into the banked sections, how they get down there, do they use the apron or not? Is that to their benefit? All those kind of things are interesting in an oval race. And I think in the Phoenix race that we saw, there was some cool dynamics as a result of that. There was a really cool scene where there was a rookie out on track named Dennis Hauger. I don't know if you know the guy. He had this spin where he made this super dramatic 180 save on the track where he was driving down the straightaway backward for about half of it because he had spun around and caught it, but now was steering the car such that there wasn't a place to turn around. And so he drove about halfway down the straightaway till he got to a point where there was no traffic and then made this cool J-turn to kind of turn around and get going again. That's one of those things you're going to see at an oval that it could happen at a road course too, but he knew if he kept in the spin, like there's a wall right there. So all he could do was keep straight in it in a way that I don't know that I've seen that happen very often in a road course race.
Oval races, the average speeds are just going to be so high. Like, that's the excitement, is that, they're going so fast, and the closing rates with the draft and stuff like that, and any small little wrong move, and there's a big accident that could potentially occur. I just think, like, of course, like the Indy 500, that's an oval. That's its own, like, separate thing is what I would say. And
Right.
There's the other oval races that happen in IndyCar as well. It's just kind of hard to, like, see the dynamic racing on the oval races in modern IndyCar like there was in the old school IndyCar days. And I just think that, like, maybe the competition or like the wheel-to-wheel racing, the aggressiveness on the ovals is really toned down just because like all of the major accidents that have occurred in IndyCar and in recent history have all been at ovals. And I think there's still kind of I at least feel like there's still that aura around it for IndyCar where it's like they're not going to throw really aggressive moves on one another because they just don't want to hurt their fellow driver. Because, I mean, the risk level is so much higher on an oval if you go side by side and make a mistake and hit one of those cars. They're going so fast and the impacts into the walls are so aggressive. And, open wheel cars on ovals too, the potential of wheel-to-wheel contact and a car going airborne and stuff like that. So it kind of sucks. Like, I feel like it is turned down on the aggression level comparative to what it has been. So I feel like the oval races for IndyCar have started to lose their luster.
Ovals and open wheel are hard to combine. If you think about the nature of the cars, you kept hearing the commentators talking about the end fences getting up into tires. So, at the end of the wing, there's those uprights that stick up, and you get one of those anywhere near a tire of another car. Those things are made out of carbon fiber. They slash right through those tires. So really dangerous for them to be traveling so close to each other. And that's the whole point of an oval race, is to have a tight pack of people making use of the dynamics of the oval track itself. Although, to give credit, I think where it's due, the Phoenix race, there were a ton of passes. And that's one of the things about an oval race. You're going to see a lot of changes of the lead. And I think the statistic that I was most impressed by was that at Phoenix, there were 565 passes during the IndyCar race. So just that number of lead changes occurred. Okay, some of those are very momentary, but that means things are constantly changing as the race is going on. That makes for some interesting watching. And while I prefer a road course myself, it gave me a little bit more to kind of hang my hat on and get some interest out of the IndyCar race, especially since we didn't see our good friend Nolan Siegel coming up the way we had hoped later in the race.
Right, exactly. And I think he is one of the reasons why I want to watch the IndyCar races, and just so hopeful of like him catching a break from a strategic perspective or a car setup perspective, that he's going to be up close to the front. And I think if he was running in, the top 15, top 10 consistently, I would have more skin in the game to watch IndyCar.
Same.
I find it interesting of like within all these series, F1, NASCAR, IndyCar, that like I'm the least excited about IndyCar, which I wouldn't have said that maybe a year ago. Of like, I would have said like NASCAR, IndyCar, then F1. But like, I think IndyCar is well at the bottom of, and especially after last year with Alex Palou being so dominant with the new hybrid systems in the cars, really changing the weight and dynamics of the vehicles. It's hard to have like an exciting IndyCar race. And arguably, I think it's also because like those drivers are so phenomenal and so close to perfect that any sort of minor error, and whether that's strategy, pit stop, coming out in traffic versus clean air, can like change whether you're 5th or 15th. Like it is such a small window of success in IndyCar because all the teams are so good, and because it's basically a spec car and all the drivers are so good. It's all up to like the rest of the racing dynamics, which aren't exciting, like the logistics of strategy that plays a huge role in IndyCar.
Yeah, and Nolan being on the McLaren team, right, is alongside Pato O'Ward and Christian Lundgaard. And you have to wonder, are they going to run the same strategy for all three cars? Are they actively permuting the strategy so that the up-and-coming, not quite rookie, but newer guy to the series is maybe not going to get all the calls his way, whereas the leaders in Pato and Christian are getting more of that? I don't know. I hope that'll change. I'm just like you. I'm so excited to see how Nolan is done, and that sort of dictates whether or not I'm going to tune in for a broadcast or not most of the time.
So speaking of Fox Sports, because we did have this crossover of the same broadcaster broadcasting IndyCar as well as NASCAR, and in the beginning of this season, seeing a lot of crossover between NASCAR and IndyCar through the Fox Sports broadcasting, having the trucks at St. Pete, having both series at Phoenix, all that sort of stuff. I think it is great that they're trying to cross-promote those two series with one another, and it's to the benefit of the broadcasting network to like help raise up viewership in both of the series that they're covering.
When it's done well.
Right, exactly. And I think like, broadcasting perspective, I think they're doing a good job so far this season. What I found that was really interesting, and I think it was during the COTA weekend as well as the opener for IndyCar, which was at St. Pete. But it's an interesting thing that Fox Sports does, because obviously Fox doesn't just cover racing. They cover a lot of other sports as well. And I think they put more emphasis on their coverage of football comparative to their coverage of motorsports. But during that weekend, it was really interesting that they had these ex-quarterbacks that were like helping to do the pre-race show broadcasting. And as a racing fan myself, I watch racing. I don't watch stick and ball sports. Like, I don't know who these people are. So, like, for me, it gives me no added value to watching the broadcast. And then for these ex-quarterback football players being in racing, they don't really know anything about racing either. So it's not like they're adding anything themselves to the broadcast. And I don't know if, like, is Fox thinking that, like, having these individuals during the broadcast is going to, like, bring in football players? Because I don't even think that translates very well either.
Yeah, I guess these are current players in some cases too. So they're just trying to take advantage of the media overlap where they're advertising these folks, or maybe they have sponsor deals with them specifically. And as part of their contract, they're like, hey, we're going to use you for anything else that we feel is appropriate. So hope you like motorsports. We're dragging you to some races. We're going to get you involved with that stuff. I don't know that it really lands for me. The overlap of these sports is tenuous at best. There doesn't even seem to be much interest, even on the part of the people who are being brought in from another sport to go be part of this motorsports activity. They don't all seem like they're really knowledgeable about what's going on, or even the racers knowledgeable of who these athletes are. And I think in the case of the NASCAR NFL overlap, they had Robert Griffin III come out there, and he was wearing a Jeff Gordon jacket, but then he made some comment to the guy about driving the 24, and he didn't know who actually drove the 24 car. What was the thing with that?
RG3, I guess is his nickname. He was doing the pit lane walk with Michael Waltrip, and so they were going through and doing, like, Michael Waltrip always does funny interviews with the drivers anyway and, like, messes with them. You know, he's just a goofy guy. That was the vibe that they were trying to put off and just be funny about it and this, that, the other. But yeah, he was wearing... RG3 was wearing a Jeff Gordon Rainbow Warrior jacket, and he goes up to William Byron, who drives the 24 currently, and he's like, oh, you're driving the 24 today? Oh, you got some big shoes to fill, and this. And it was just kind of like, this is weird. I don't know who this guy is. He's not adding anything to this broadcast. And, like, even, like, the drivers, you can kind of tell they're like, yeah, I don't even know who this guy is either. Because it's like, race car drivers, I feel like, for the most part, and this is a generalization, but, like, they're not watching football. I mean, maybe some of them are really big football fans, but, like, I feel like a couple of the drivers are kind of looking like, I have no idea who this guy is.
Yeah, and you have to imagine you're William Byron. You've been number 24 for a while now.
Oh, yeah.
So you already know this is Jeff Gordon. Like, up and down, left and right, you knew that from day one. You're well over that fact, and here's somebody who just shows up for the first time, be like, oh, hey, 24. I learned what that is. Do you know about this thing?
Do you know who Jeff Gordon is?
Yeah. Oh, I think I've heard of him somewhere. Was he a driver of some sort? It's just strange. It seems like they're a fish out of water. They are just not in a place that they know or they're comfortable in. And it's a weird mashup. It's not the kind of thing where the unlike things create a fun dynamic. Right. I think Fox just got this wrong. And they've done it again, right? They had another case where there was a pep talk. Can you talk about that? It was like one of the quarterbacks, I think, who's currently in the NFL. I think it's Jameis Winston.
Yeah.
Came out to give a pep talk to the new rookie in IndyCar.
Yeah, he was at the IndyCar race that same weekend, and they were doing once again the pit walk broadcast, and they ran into him on pit lane, and they're like, oh, we have a new rookie in the field this year. You know, you got to give him some, like, words of wisdom. And so, like, he went walking and found the new rookie in IndyCar, and it was like giving him this, like, sports pep talk of, like, it's about team and it's about heart and it's about, you know, you've been working hard and you belong here and you've done everything in your career to be in this moment right now. And I remember watching the interview, and once again, I'm, like, looking at the driver, and I'm sure he's looking at this guy. He's like, I don't know who you are. Like, it's just one of those things where, like, yeah, football, racing, there's not really that crossover. And it just leads you to, like, ask the question of Fox doing this, of bringing in these other athletes into racing. Who is this for? Because as a motorsport fan, as a racing fan that I don't know or watch any other sports, I'm just left clueless. I don't know who that person is. They're not adding anything to the analysis of my sport before it gets going. And then you're like, is this to connect other sports fans? I don't think that works. All it left me to believe is just, like, within the Fox broadcasting company, they're sports fans. Like, they're into other sports more than they are into motorsports. And they're like, oh, think about how cool it would be if we brought in this quarterback to do the pre-race. Yeah, that'd be awesome. And it like hits for no one else except for the executive team at Fox.
It totally reminded me of that sketch that Keegan-Michael Key did where he comes out on the...
Oh, dude, that was so funny.
Yes. Came out on the field and he pretended he was like a college coach of a football team, and he just started saying all this effectively really empty stuff, but the kinds of things you hear coaches say all the time.
Yep.
What you were talking about with the NFL player who was giving counsel to the rookie in NASCAR, same kind of vibes all the way.
Very stereotypical, like post-game sports interview.
Got to give 100%, 110%, 120%, all the percents.
I can't take accountability on my own. It's about my boys. It's about the team. We all came together. It's like, yeah, it's the stereotypical like sports stuff. And it just, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, obviously Fox Sports is going to try to like cross over motorsports into like the rest of the things that they do. But I think it's like there is a very clear distinction between motorsports and the rest of sports. Like there's not a lot of crossover. That's why I like that Fox did the crossover between IndyCar and NASCAR. I think that's worthwhile energy of trying to, like, if you're a really diehard IndyCar fan, maybe stay, watch a NASCAR race. If you're really into NASCAR, hey, IndyCar goes on ovals too. Maybe pay attention to them a little bit. Like, I like that crossover. Like, I think it'd be crazy if, like, IndyCar and F1 raced at the same track in the same weekend. That would be an insane, cool crossover to, like, help broadcast fans amongst those two sports. But when you take anything motorsports and you go to, like, stick and ball stuff, I just don't think it works.
And lest you think only Fox Sports was trying this, I watched the beginning of the F1 weekend on Apple TV. And if you watch it on Apple TV, it's got a ton of commercials in it compared to watching it on F1 TV, where I guess you're paying for a subscription, so there's not a bunch of commercials. And in one of the commercials, wouldn't you know it, we have a couple NFL players sitting on the lawn talking about Formula One. And again, I was kind of like, who are these guys? What's their connection to the sport? I couldn't figure it out at all, and kind of made me wonder if this is more of the kind of thing we're going to see from Apple being more involved in Formula One. You know, they did a good job with the F1 movie, pretty good job. They've now taken over the rights along with Netflix for Drive to Survive, but I'm really hopeful that they don't just completely watered this thing down into making it a serial so that they can push it along the other shows on Apple TV or lose sight of what the sport is and kind of devolve it into pure entertainment.
Yeah, and maybe we're on the island here. I don't know, right? Like, maybe there are people that are like, oh, that's so cool that blah, blah, blah quarterback from whatever NFL team is, like, into F1. Maybe there is that perspective. I don't know, right?
I don't think anybody was so excited to see Shaq show up at the Sonoma NASCAR race a few years ago. And not only was he not there to be a basketball player interested in NASCAR, he was a DJ. So that was completely different. You have Michael Jordan as a team owner in NASCAR. I mean, to me, that's more legitimate crossover and interest for somebody who's an athlete and dominant and expert at one area to show interest in something else. That to me is more relevant. And I wish they dig into that. But if not for all the bad blood with 2311 in NASCAR, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, but like Michael Jordan, like he's an iconic figure, even if you've never watched a basketball game in your life, right?
That's right.
Like you know who he is, and you might even know him just because he's like, oh yeah, he makes really cool shoes, right? Like
absolutely,
it's one of those
cultural aspect that he brings.
Exactly, and I wish that like, I guess for a little bit, like NASCAR would lean a little bit more of that they have Michael Jordan a part of their sport. Like I feel like there'd be a lot of cool collaborations that they could do with Nike merchandise and whatever collaborative with NASCAR. Maybe there is a little bit of that bad blood with the 2311 lawsuit of like, oh, screw this guy. Like, he's only in for his own self-business interest. But, like, once again, like, I think there's better collaborations that can be done to help viewership and engagement rather than these kind of just, like, weak grabs at stuff that, like, kind of just comes across as, like, being tone deaf on what they're actually trying to promote.
Yeah, and focus us back on the motorsport. You know, to your comment about Formula 2, what's the next series of people coming up? You know, just because we're watching a cup race at NASCAR, who are the people in Xfinity we should be watching out for? Who are the next ranks of those coming up into these sports that we should be paying attention to or being aware of? Not a lot of time spent on that kind of stuff, and maybe because it's speculative, but that would at least be more relevant to the sports than the things we're seeing in the name of marketing. There's plenty of other things that could be done here, so on one hand, I want to give them some credit for trying, but it's not resonated and it's not worked really well, so hopefully they'll continue trying some different things and finding different ways to promote these sports to a new audience, to a broader audience than what they've had traditionally. But stepping back from all of that, in terms of what the seasons all provide, I'm really excited to see what F1's going to do this season. They had an amazing start. NASCAR has proven to be fairly exciting and maybe unusual for it, so I'll take that at face value. And finally, IndyCar has broken out of the same person winning all the time, so maybe that bodes well for the future.
All right, well, this has been a fun conversation and getting excited about the 2026 race season. It started off with a pretty big hit in a lot of ways, and I'm still excited to continue to watch. My NASCAR and F1 has grabbed my attention more so than I thought, and very hopeful that IndyCar will continue to be an interesting season and that they don't have a blowout like they did last year.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks for this conversation, Todd.
Thanks, Sylas.
And thanks for listening. This has been Cold Start.